Senator Lindsey Graham was perhaps the most vocal supporter of Brett Kavanaugh in the Senate, even erupting in anger at the nominee's critics during the confirmation hearings. Speaking to reporters just moments after Kavanaugh was confirmed, the South Carolina Republican insisted Dr. Christine Blasey Ford was treated well by the Senate and offered this by a way of comparison.
I think Dr. Ford was treated well. I think the roles were reversed. The slut, whore, drunk was Kavanaugh.
Mike Barnacle, what would John McCain do? What would John McCain say?
I think what John McCain would say is, Lindsey, who are you? What has happened to you? Because clearly, I mean, he morphed into Donald Trump, into a Donald Trump supporter, before John McCain was even put in the ground in Annapolis. It is shocking how quickly he switched over to maybe who he really is. We don't know who he really is. We've had him on here, Joe and Mika, as you know, numerous times. He's engaging, he can be funny, he can be sort of introspective about things like the United States Senate. But during the course of these hearings, he is someone who is unrecognizable in terms of who you thought he was. I mean, Mark, I don't know what your take on it is, but I mean, who is he?
I can't remember, although it happens all the time, the distance and the gulf between where Lindsey Graham was and where he is now. You know, you think about the things he said during the campaign about Donald Trump. Couldn't be further from where he is now, and you just get a sense that, you know, is this Senator Graham speaking or is this future Attorney General Graham speaking?
Yeah, yeah.
He wants to be Attorney General so badly, Mika. But I guess you do what he thinks he has to do.
Yeah, he's lost me.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.